Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3737. Today's date is 2nd of December 2025. It's been almost like a morning at 8:46 a.m. Alright, let's just jump into the question. Alright, yeah. The question is, what if you woke up with the power to fly? Oh, that is a really good question. That's a really good question. Okay. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking this question to myself? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It kind of like a force you to think about that reality. And when I try to think about that reality, I'm kind of like simply utilizing my knowledge and information that I've been through and try to explain, like, try, okay, sorry, I was kind of like, when I try to create that reality, I'm kind of like utilizing my knowledge and information that I kind of like been through. And when I try to utilize this kind of like a simply knowledge and information, when I try to create that reality from knowledge and experience and things, it just it just thinks really good. It just, I don't know how do I supposed to explain. It felt good. Okay, it felt something like that. Ki, like basically take this example. Okay, like this is kind of like, take this question. The question is not a kind of like a simply the stagnant answer like what is that, 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. No, the answer would be kind of like a relative regarding about the people, their thought process, the way that they think, and also the knowledge that they have. So it's somehow kind of like a simply just, somehow kind of, when you try to explain this thing, it somehow kind of like a gain knowledge and things. I don't know, it felt good. That's it. That's the only thing that I don't really have any proper explanation regarding about how things happen, but it somehow felt good. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's raw, it's unfiltered, it's just my opinion. So do not believe in any kind of like information that I'm saying, or do not seek for any kind of like information that I'm saying. Okay, it's my opinion and opinion are subjective. All right, so the question is that what if human could fly? Sorry, I'm kind of like a simply uh, sitting in front of the sun and kind of like a soaking of the sun because it's a winter, and also I'm kind of like a simply popping my pimples. But actually what is actually happened now, right now I'm kind of like a simply, the mobile phone screen is kind of like act like a mirror. Okay, yeah, I'm kind of like a simply popping. There is a some sort of pimple on my nose, and when I kind of like press it, it kind of like somebody came out those white pus thing. And it's, is it, I'm not really sure what exactly is that, but I think is it kind of like a something that something mud. I'm not really sure what exactly is this thing, but it is it smell really terrible, by the way. Okay, yeah, it smell like that key fart. Okay, yeah, probably. Yeah, but I have a lot of it. Let me take it out. Oh my god. Oh boy. There's a lot of pus actually came out from my nose. I don't know why, but why does it kind of like something at my, it's all in my nose, dude. It's all in my nose. Just let me quick it out. Ah, yeah, it smell really terrible. Okay, yeah. I think, is it because of my skin is oily? I think was that. Yeah, like basically Indian skins are always meant to be really oily, and that's why. Dude, what are you doing? You just have to record the artifact now. Yeah, just give me just couple of seconds. Just let me pop my pimple little bit. Okay, there's a, oh, there's a lot of white thing came out. Okay, another. Okay, another. Hmm. But okay, yeah, you can do it now. Like basically, is this thing that simultaneously you can pop the thing and simultaneously you can record the artifact. Can you able to do this thing? Yeah, I could do this thing. It's not really that hard. Okay, yeah, the question is not really that much complicated, but still it's a little bit. But I don't know why. I just don't want to divert my attention both at the same time. So let me do one thing. Let me just tell this thing. If I need any kind of like attention, I will stop it. Okay. So what is at least this question? The question is actually about that he can be able to fly. Like next day you wake up and you can able to fly, and not just you, basically everyone around you can able to fly. Like human could kind of like simply able to fly. Then what would be happen? What would be that particular reality? What would be that particular stuff? Well, if such thing will happen, then probably like first of all, now I'm kind of like simply very hard to digest that thing that human could fly, because our biology is not meant to be fly. Why? Because just imagine yourself. Okay, yeah, that key when you try to fly things. Wait, there is a very big thing. Oh my god, there is a lot of pussies. Okay. Oh, I don't know how there's so many things actually. Okay, there is also another thing. Let me pop it. Is it good to pop the pimple? Because I think that it is just maybe just little. Okay, huh? Okay, wait. There is a big one in my nose. Is it black? Probably. Oh, yeah, it smells really terrible. Yeah, but how is this thing is actually at my nose? Yeah, it's not a kind of like a something pimple who's kind of like a something in red. It's kind of like a something a skin that look terrible. Wait, okay, I don't want to. Okay, yeah, there's a black one. Okay. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Okay. Oh my god, my nose look red. Okay, yeah, my entire nose look red. Oh, oh boy. I should supposed to be drop it. It's not really good thing to kind of like pop the pimple. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, but it just easily come out that pus. It's I don't know why. It's just I'm not really sure that should be supposed to be pop the. I don't know why is that na. The every time I try to kind of like assembly pop the pus na pop this pimple, it's very addictive by the way. I just can't stop myself not doing that thing. It just kind of like a feel like that ki I'm kind of like a only getting out something out of my body, and it somehow kind of like a suddenly feel really good. That come kind of like a suddenly I just feel like that I'm cleansing my body and stuff like that. I'm kind of like a feel like I'm kind of like a suddenly removing all those kind of like a something stuff and things. Yeah, it's very addictive. Just wait. Okay, another. Oh my god, there is a lot of buses actually came out. Okay, another. Wait. There is also another. Okay, another. Okay. Ooh, boy, so much amount of white thing is actually came out. Okay, it's not a kind of like only a liquid, but it's something solid, but it's a kind of like something a cream. Okay, I think that is had enough. Yeah, that is had enough. Yeah, that's it should supposed to be stop it again. Just one little bit. Okay, I cleanse it properly. There is at the edge. Okay, another. Is it clean up? No, again. No, it's clean up. It clean up properly. Yeah, this. Yeah, it's clean up properly. Okay, yeah. My nose look red by the way. Yeah, my entire nose look red. Yeah. By the way, my skin is not really that much fair, but after all those things, still my nose look red. Okay, why I said this thing is because of that when you have a skin is a fair. Fair means like the little bit of kind of like a something brighter skin, then probably something happened. It kind of like a pop out, like basically it's kind of like a feel really odd to your skin color. Okay, yeah. And red is that particular color that kind of like a pop out. Okay, yeah. But if you have a kind of like a something little bit darker skin, like basically I have, uh, then it kind of like a something, it doesn't look that much red, but mine kind of like look little bit of red is because of the way that I pop that pimples. It's just too much. No, there is no blood clotting, by the way, nothing like that all. I'm just kind of like a exhaust. I just extracted the pus probably. Yeah, and this is actually happen is because of the kind of like a simply oil. Okay, yeah. Basically Indian skins are kind of like a simply mostly associated with the oils too much, because kind of like a too much of sun. Okay, yeah. And pollutions and things and that and that. And another thing is that ki also care too. Okay, how much you care is also really essential. I didn't care that much, so yeah. Dude, it's been almost like 11 minutes and I'm kind of like a talking shit. All right, yeah. Okay, so let's just talk about the things that what if that tomorrow you could wake up and you can fly. Okay, yeah. So first of all, can you able to fly? Like basically is this thing, can we able to fly? Now if I try to imagine as a fly, means like that I'm kind of like some imagine as a Superman who could fly like that. Like basically just kind of like somebody just raise your hand and you just kind of like somebody fly and things like that. But technicality flies is not the way that Superman fly. Okay, yeah. In reality, if you wanted to fly, you need a wings, you need a thrust, you need a exhaust, you need power, you need a lot of things. And basically our human body is not meant to have all those stuff. Our body is not aerodynamics. We don't really have wings. We are very solid, by the way. Okay, let me give you perspective. The birds that you are kind of like seeing on the sky, they are flying, they are very like their bones are very ductile. Okay, yeah. Ductile means what? A ductile means like that ki kind of like a somewhat something, they are hollow. Okay, yeah. Or the weight of the skeleton is not meant to be kind of like something lifting the body that much. Okay, yeah. Basically is this thing na ki if you kind of like something take the bird, you just kind of like realize that na they have kind of like a very less bone structure. They have it, it's not like that they don't really have it, they have it. But probably is this thing na ki the way that our body, our bone structure is kind of like a legit solid. Okay, yeah. Legit solid with all those kind of like some chemicals or all those kind of like some like basically it's solid bone. Okay, but probably the bird has a kind of like a hollow bone. That hollow bone is a kind of like gives little less weight in the wings. Okay, yeah. Which kind of like help them to kind of like lift them up, which kind of like help them to kind of like simply fly and things like that. Our body, our bones are not meant to be that. Our body, our bones are kind of like have a lot of weight and things like that. Not only the bone, like we also have muscles and things and that. And probably from every possible perspective, our human body is not meant to be fly. Okay, yeah. Like basically if we wanted to fly, then probably our body structure kind of like have to be look like a bird. Okay, yeah. Then and only then you could fly, or else might be we could kind of like somebody evolve with such a kind of like something a thruster which could thrust from our hips. Okay. Then it could be possible. But still is this thing that our body structure is cannot define the for flying. It's not meant to be fly. But still, let's just kind of like don't really talk about the biology and just talk about the kind of like a physics and kind of like how much impact in the society and things like that. So let's just talk about that first. All right. Okay, yeah. So first of all is that if I could kind of like simply fly, or not just me, like every human could fly, then what would be happen? What exactly is this thing? Well, first of all is that if everyone could fly, okay, yeah, there is a possible thing that people have to understand. Like basically is this thing, let's just imagine, okay, yeah, today is a 2nd of December 2025, and suddenly everyone has started flying. Okay, yeah. So when you are started flying means what? Flying means like that, flying like a Superman? No, it's not gonna possible. Our body is not meant to be fly. One thing, our body is not meant to be kind of like a fly that faster, and our body is not meant to be kind of like a simply meant for that ki kind of like ascend and descend and stop anywhere and things like that. Like example, okay, yeah, in when the birds are actually flying, how they apply brakes? Yeah, how they apply brakes? They apply brakes by kind of like a something their wing position. Okay, yeah, they kind of like a shifted their wing position in such a way that they would kind of like a get lot of kind of like a somebody thrust and things like that, so that they would kind of like a reduce the drag, and they would kind of like a stop themselves. Okay, yeah. So wings are kind of like a really much essential for them to kind of like a stopping them. Okay, yeah. In aeroplane we have thruster and we also use the gravity. Okay, yeah. A gravity and thruster we could kind of like imply both to kind of like a stop it. Even if we really required kind of like a even more kind of like a simply drag it out, then probably we would also have wings, and those wings are kind of like a somebody utilizes for kind of like a drag ourselves, or we would or maybe we would kind of like attach the parachute or things like that, so it would kind of like a somebody drag even more further. So we actually kind of like apply brakes and things like that. But mostly in the mid-air, usually we are utilizing thrust and gravity to kind of like assembly brakes and stuff like that. Now, how do we supposed to use this thing? How do we supposed to utilize the kind of like assembly thrust and gravity? Okay, so basically imagine is this thing, if you are kind of like assembly running, okay, yeah, and suddenly, okay, so like basically is this thing, you are kind of like sitting in front of the sitting on the rocket. Okay, yeah. Now rocket is kind of like assembly just flying. Okay, you are on the kind of like assembly rocket. So if you want to kind of like assembly stop the rocket, what should you supposed to do? You just kind of like you have to be kind of like a stop the kind of like assembly whatever that rocket should supposed to be kind of like assembly pulling the power, like basically it's the stop the fan and things like that. When you stop the fan, the aeroplane will not gonna move further. Okay, but it's not gonna happen that you just stop it and kind of like assembly the aeroplane stop at one place. No, it's not gonna happen. Okay, you just stop, the blades are kind of like still rotating, but it kind of like it doesn't really have that much amount of power. Okay, yeah. It kind of like is still move ahead, but because of the gravity it also kind of like a fall down too. Okay, yeah. So these are kind of like a two things that we could use, a kind of like a thrust or power, or reduce the power, and kind of like a utilizing the gravity so that we would supposed to be stop and things like that. Okay, yeah. What if we would have a kind of like a somebody, let's just say that we should supposed to be turn. Okay, yeah, like let's just say I have a plane and I have to be turned to the left. So how do you supposed to do that thing? Well, it's not a kind of like a typical thing that you do on the roads. Okay, yeah, like basically you just kind of like apply the brakes and turn left and turn right. No, it's not gonna happen, because in the mid-air there is no traffic at all, there is nothing really at all. Probably if you are kind of like a simply fly really close to the surface, then it would be kind of like a something like a mountains and building would be kind of like available over there. But if you kind of like a cross, maybe let's just say almost like a 500 or let's just say 1 kilometer away, then probably you don't really have anything at all. Probably you might have get kind of like a simply mountains, that's it. But rest of the things it's kind of like a very clear, so you don't really have any kind of like a simply way that you should supposed to be turn left and right things, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. But another thing is that what if I could kind of like simply want to go to London, and London is in my left way, left side. So how do I supposed to turn it? So you have wings and you just kind of like simply turn to the propeller to the wing. So basically what does wings do? Wings is kind of like simply is this thing that it drag at one plane, it creates the drag in one side of the plane, and kind of like increase the efficiency, increase the power in other side, so that it would supposed to be turned left. Okay, let me give you another perspective. Have you ever seen a kind of like a similar truck is kind of like a assembly moving? Okay, so look at the kind of like a assembly axle. Okay, so what exactly is this thing? How the truck is kind of like a turn. Okay, look at very closely when there is an axle connected to the both wheel. Okay, so if I kind of like assembly when the truck is kind of like a turn to the left, what exactly happened? That left side of wheel is not rotate that much, but right side of wheel is kind of like a rotate too much. Let me give you perspective. The left side of wheel is kind of like a, let's just say rotate maybe kind of like assembly 1 rpm or 2 rpm or 3 rpm. Okay, like basically it's like when the brakes actually apply, so basically at that time speed is very low. Okay, so basically no 2 rpm, no, let's just say like a 20 rpm. Okay, 20 rpm or 40 rpm. So basically the left side of wheel is kind of like a rotate little bit slower as compared to the right side of wheel kind of like a rotate faster. Maybe let's just say the 20 rpm is actually happen on the left side, then 40 rpm or 50 rpm is actually happen to the right side. So when it actually happened, that particular thing, the entire body structure is kind of like something rotate left, because the left side of wheel is not let you go faster. So basically the inertia, the center, the basically center is actually shifted from truck to kind of like a assembly. Yeah, so it the entire truck is actually moved. Okay, so this is what actually happened, and this actually happened is because of the differential. Okay, yeah. If you don't know what is a differential, a differential is a kind of like a sort of mechanical component on the automobile sector. It's actually contact. It's a kind of like connected with the axle. Okay, yeah. Like basically is this thing that the entire wheel is actually connected to the axle rod, and axle rod is actually connected to the differential. Differential has a kind of like a multiple gear, which kind of like a somebody decide that which wheel should supposed to be get more power. Okay, yeah, like a more kind of like assembly the rotation and things and that, which would kind of like really help to kind of like assembly rotate and things like that. This is what exactly happened in the plane. Okay, yeah, but plane doesn't really have wheel, plane doesn't really have kind of like some axle and things like that. Plane have kind of like a wings, and they are kind of like utilizing the wings. Okay, yeah. If you still not really understand, let me give you another context. Okay, yeah. What you have to do is that when you are kind of like somebody driving, okay, yeah, what you have to do, kind of like a pull out your hand in the mid-air and kind of like somebody act as a flying. Okay, like have you ever done that, like basically just kind of like put your hand kind of like somebody just flying and things like that. Okay, yeah, you kind of like feel the air beneath kind of like going from bottom and top. Okay, you can feel the air. Okay, yeah, when you try to stop it, like when you kind of like pull your palm kind of like somebody drag and things like that, you feel a drag in your hand. Okay, yeah, when you kind of like let's just say straight, you don't really feel that much drag. Okay, yeah, like this is the exactly thing is actually happen when you kind of like stop the plane and things like that, or break the plane and things like that, to kind of like increase the drag and things like that, so that it reduces the speed. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that if you wanted to turn left and right, what you have to do is that if you wanted to turn left, then you have to tilt your hand to the left. So when this thing is actually happen, the one side of the palm, one side of the hand is actually kind of like assembly, kind of like taking little less drag, and one side of the palm is kind of like getting more drag. So when this thing actually happen, your entire palm is kind of like a rotate to the left. You just have to tilt it to the left, and kind of like a rotate to the left. If you wanted to turn right, you just have to tilt it to the right, it kind of like a rotate to the right. Okay, yeah, you just have to do it. But it's kind of like it depend on kind of like a size and planes and kind of like area of structures and things like that. Okay, yeah, because your cross section areas actually depend on that. If you have a kind of like a rocket which kind of like act as a cylinder, you cannot able to do this thing. You really require a kind of like a wings to kind of like a manipulate and things like that, or else you could kind of like a utilize booster. Okay, yeah, well, booster kind of like a really helpful. Booster is a kind of like some external force are attached in the rocket, so that it would kind of like a booster or kind of like assembly calculated by the kind of like assembly where it should supposed to be moved. It kind of like assembly, if you wanted to turn the booster kind of like assembly at left side, kind of like assembly fire the booster, and it kind of like a turn it into the right side. If it kind of like assembly booster turn into the left, then the booster kind of like attached into the right. It kind of like booster thing is not actually utilized in the most oftenly. Booster actually utilized in the space, it's not actually utilizing in our atmosphere. Okay, yeah, because it kind of like some hazards and things like it's kind of like a really not good things. Okay, yeah. So for this particular purpose, if you wanted to kind of like a turn left and right, or kind of like a stop and things like that, you need that body structure, you need a wings, and wings are really essential. Now how does we have wings? We don't really have wings. Okay, look at your body. Do you have wings? You have just hand, and hands doesn't really have that much cross section area. So what should you supposed to do? You cannot able to manipulate. How do you supposed to stop? How do you supposed to kind of like a turn left and right? it's the physics is not letting you do this thing, and either you can't let you do this thing until and unless you just have to wear the wingsuit, and this might kind of like something will work. But other than that, you cannot. You cannot. So basically is this thing, tomorrow if I could kind of like started flying and things like that, probably people would gonna die is because of they can't able to kind of like stop themselves, or they can't able to kind of like somebody just rotate and things like that. Okay, yeah. So probably is this thing, millions of people would gonna die, because obviously how it should supposed to be. Okay, it's not gonna possible. Okay, yeah. One thing. Another thing. Okay, let's talk about the atmospheric pressure. We are kind of like living at the surface of the earth. Okay, in the surface, the atmosphere is kind of like somewhat something Okay. Okay. Okay means like that it has kind of like assembly the abundant amount of oxygen and kind of like airs and things and that. Okay. For this particular purpose, I'm kind of like giving you particular example. Okay. What you have to do is that take a kind of like a beaker, okay, a glass of beaker, and you just have to put some sort of thing. First of all, put the water, okay, yeah, then put the oil, then put the honey, or then put the kerosene. Okay, yeah. These are the kind of like a four fluid that you should supposed to be kind of like a put it. And when you put that thing, you instantly realize that the one of the heaviest fluid is honey is kind of like assembly the at the kind of like a bottom. Okay, yeah. Then kind of like assembly the water or maybe kerosene or things like that. What I'm trying to tell you is this thing, even if you stir it kind of like a things, it might kind of like assembly like it does not mix that much. Huh, like basically it kind of like a mix when you kind of like stir it. Okay, yeah. But after a kind of like after a couple of minutes and things like that, everything will kind of like assembly kind of like assembly just be in position. Like a honey should supposed to be bottom and things like that. Now this is actually happen is because of that key. This is what kind of like a honey is very much heavy as compared to the kerosene, as compared to the water, as compared to the any other liquid and things like that. So that's why it kind of like assembly stay at bottom. Okay, yeah. And the kind of like a lighter it liquid, it kind of like assembly at the top. Okay, yeah. This is also exactly happened to our atmosphere too. Our atmosphere is kind of like a filled with lot of gases, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and those are things. And those gases those also have a kind of like a little bit density regarding about that where they should supposed to be. Okay, like basically is this thing oxygen and things and that. These are kind of like a simply is this thing that kind of like a simply stay at the surface, probably stay at the surface, or maybe almost like a maybe 500 meter, or maybe kind of like a till the 1 kilometer. Okay, one, or maybe I'm not really sure, but kind of like a higher density of oxygen and things like that, which kind of like is available in kind of like a around the surface and things like that. When you went to the higher, then you will kind of like a getting loss of oxygen because of there is very less oxygen is actually available. That's why most of people are kind of like a going to the kind of like a mountain climbing or things like that. They are kind of like a carrying their oxygen tank because of that in the top you don't really have that much oxygen. Okay, yeah, because very less amount of oxygen actually exists. So that's why you are kind of like a seeing kind of like a some nausea or kind of like unconsciousness or things like that. You might kind of like somebody fall and things like that because lack of oxygen, things like that. Okay, yeah. Now basically this is what actually happened because of the lack of oxygen, because at the surface you will kind of like get more of oxygen and things like that, but in when you went to the top you will kind of like getting very less and less of that, less of those oxygens and things and that. Now imagine if the people could fly, people would kind of like simply fly like a higher and higher. They would kind of like imagine that how much you could go higher. No, basically, if yeah, you could go higher. Like a basically is this thing that a genie would kind of like give them a kind of like assembly a wish that you could fly and things like that. Huh? So you could fly, but when you went to fly, then probably after maybe like kilometer or maybe like a 2 or 5 kilometer, you might not gonna kind of like simply fly. You will kind of like a dead body because there is no there is no oxygen, and you don't know how do you supposed to stop it because you don't really have wings. So you just go up ahead. Huh? Maybe kind of like a gravity will gonna act you kind of like simply let you not less escape from the gravity of this thing. So which is really good. But still is this thing you are kind of like a dead body is actually flying because you will kind of like a lack of oxygen. You will kind of like somebody you lost your consciousness, nothing really at all. So probably is this thing you will gonna die. Okay, yeah, because lack of consciousness and things and that and oxygens and stuff like that, and also the pressure, dude. Okay, yeah, the pressure. Okay, let me give you context. Okay, yeah, we are actually at the surface have a kind of like a some little bit kind of like a some pressure that we could supposed to be sustained. Okay, what is exactly the pressure means what? Okay, so have you ever went to swimming, underwater swimming? Okay, if you went to the swimming, you might gonna understand. If you not really understand, then do swimming. Yeah, like do swimming. It's a really good thing. Okay, you have to be swimming. It's really essential skills that you should supposed to be learn. Okay, first of all, when you went to the swimming, okay, if you are kind of like a went to the underground, let's just say 5 meter or 10 meter, when you went to the underground you are kind of like a feel lot of pressure at your ears. There is something that kind of like a feels that something is kind of like a apply pressure on your ears, specifically on ear first. Why ear? because air has a kind of like a drum, okay, yeah, which is very kind of like a simply very thin, okay, yeah. It kind of like a vibrate through kind of like a when someone speaks and things like that, like kind of like a vibrate, and you could kind of like a heard this thing, okay, yeah. Our eardrums are kind of like a simply very thin organ, okay, yeah. And it cannot able to kind of like simply sustain that much amount of pressure and things like that, until and unless you are kind of like a wearing headphones or helmet or things like that, or protective gear. This might be kind of like, in this particular context, you might kind of like a protect your eardrums. But if you are not, if you don't really wear any kind of like a simply protective things, and you just kind of like a straight dive inside the kind of like a ocean and things like that, you will feel that much pressure. And at some certain point, your your eardrums will kind of like a broke or things like that. Like basically just think, it is so much amount of pressure that your eardrums are kind of like simply broke. And I don't know how it actually happened, but you cannot able to hear. You shouldn't supposed to be go that much deeper. You should supposed to be experienced first. Like basically you went to the underground, you feel that pressure in your ear is because of the pressure is actually exerted, okay, yeah. You will not gonna feel that pressure on your skin is because of that your skin is bit more thicker. It can meant to be kind of like a sustain that much pressure, but your eardrums are not, okay, yeah. But it is also happened because of that you just kind of like a went inside almost like a 10 meter. But if you went more than that, let's just say 50 meter, 100 meter, dude, you really require a kind of like a protective gear to kind of like a went inside, because it's so much pressure. Now what is exactly a pressure means what? If you not really kind of like imagine things, okay, a pressure means like that every kind of like assembly force is acted every cross section of your body, okay, um example, okay, so what I do, imagine is this thing, I have a kind of like assembly a tank, okay, I have a kind of like a tank, and there is nothing inside, okay, there is nothing really inside, okay, let's just say there is like let's just say there is a kind of like a air inside, and I kind of like airtight that particular tank, that air will not able to move and things like that. Now basically is this thing, how much I put the effort to kind of like assembly put that tank into the water, that tank will not kind of like assembly sink. Why? Because it kind of like a consume lot of amount of air, that it meant to be kind of like assembly, it meant to be kind of like assembly just not inside, it's not meant to be kind of like a get inside. Because yeah, by the way, it's a lot of thing, it's a kind of like assembly it involved a lot of kind of like assembly the buoyancy and things that I'm not going to talk about that particular thing, okay, yeah. But imagine is a particular thing, okay, yeah. If you could kind of like put the kind of like assembly tank inside the bottom of the ocean and things like that, it would kind of like crumble in itself, okay, yeah. Okay, tank is a kind of like a very vague example that you might not gonna imagine that much. Submarine, okay, submarine is a kind of like a exactly act as a tank, okay, yeah. So basically submarine has a particular limit, okay, yeah. Basically it can went up to kind of like a 400 500 meter, or I'm not really sure, probably it went to kind of like a, let's just say, kilometer inside deep in the water, but it cannot go more beyond that. I'm not really sure what is that the range, but it cannot go beyond that. Like basically Mariana Trench is a kind of like Mariana Trench is a kind of like one of the deepest point in the Indian crust, and our equipments are not meant to be go that deep. Because of that there is so much amount of pressure that it is kind of like a feel that every cross section of every centimeter of that particular cross section of the submarine would kind of like a facing almost like a thousands of kilotons of weight in just 1 centimeter cross section of this thing, and which is so much pressure that it just kind of like crumble in itself. Like basically our entire kind of like a submarine will kind of like crumble in itself. It's not explode, it's explode inside. Okay, yeah, it's exploding inside. This is what actually happened, okay, yeah. So this is what kind of like pressure, okay. Now this is the kind of like pressure that you feel exactly at the top, at the kind of like assembly when you are trying to fly. So basically is this thing, the air pressure is kind of like assembly little less, okay. So when it is have little less pressure, then it's not exactly this thing, it's a something that when you have little less air pressure, okay. What's exactly air pressure means what, okay, air pressure means what, in the inside the water you are kind of like getting so much amount of pressure and things like that. But when you went to the kind of like assembly the outer the surface and things like that, you just went to atmosphere and troposphere and ionosphere. If you went cross than that, then probably what exactly happened, you are not actually feel that much kind of like assembly pressure and things like that, Okay, now our body is not meant to be kind of like a meant to be kind of like a feel that lack of pressure. And when it kind of like a lack of pressure, you feel that your body is kind of like simply moving like a like like without any strain, like basically anti-gravity, kind of like simply having not less gravity. You kind of like feel that thing. Another thing, if you didn't put any kind of like a protective gear and things like that, you just you I don't know how it actually happened, but your body is not meant to be survive for higher altitude pressure, because it's not okay. Without any kind of like a safety gears, you might not gonna face that thing. It's not possible. Okay, yeah. So every possible way is that you cannot able to fly. As a physics, as a biology, from every possible way, it's not meant to be fly. We cannot fly like a Superman, because Superman is a myth. Literally, if he wanted to fly, he really required kind of like a wingsuit and things and that, and the stopping mechanism. We could imagine that a Superman is a kind of like a Superman. It has a kind of like a superpower. Then probably he would kind of like sustain that much amount of pressure and things and that and that. But our body is not meant to that. Okay, definitely not. So in every possible way, can we able to fly? No, we cannot able to fly. Okay, yeah. Like basically this thing, thinking about that future that we could able to fly, it would be kind of like really good, really great. Like basically we have kind of like did a lot of innovation regarding about that. We have kind of like a flying suit, we have kind of like some jetpacks and things like that we could able to be fly, which kind of like is somewhat something replica of flying, but still is this thing that we cannot. Okay, like basically the god and whoever the person who kind of like made us or created us, it's not meant for flying. And that is true, by the way. That is true. Oh yeah. And even if that next day we would kind of like have a power that we could fly and things like that, we would really require a kind of like assembly schools that how do we supposed to be fly. Also we need to be understand that how we actually flying. Okay, yeah. Because we need understanding the mechanism that how do we supposed to fly. Are we using wings? Are we using the thrust? Are we using what kind of like a power and things like that? Okay, and it is a lot of things. Like basically you cannot kind of like somebody take an example and kind of like somebody from the cinematic world and try to put it in the real world. It's not. It is not. Until and unless if you kind of like somebody end up with the wings, then this might gonna possible. If you have a kind of like a wings, then it would be good. But still, if you wanted to kind of like a fly, that how many big wings that you need? At least like a 10 feet for just one side. Let's just 10 and 10, let's just say 20 feet wider wings really required to kind of like lift up my body. Like basically my body weight is almost like a 75 kilogram. Okay, yeah. So 75 kilogram really required kind of like a 20 feet wider wings. And obviously that wings should have kind of like a count extra weight. So let's just say if I have a kind of like a 10 feet of wings, it would kind of like a weight almost like a 10 kilo, let's just say 20 kilo. So my entire weight would be almost like 95 kilo. So basically 95 kilo of weight really required a very huge wings, and huge wing kind of like create a lot of weights and things and that. It's still not meant to be, because like basically it's this thing. Okay, yeah, why does birds look kind of like a small? Because they are meant to be small. Okay, if they wanted to kind of like a fly, they really required kind of like a less amount of energy, and kind of like a how, and less amount of energy is actually happen because of when they have kind of like a little less body weight. Like basically the faster car that we have, like a Bugatti Veyron or things like that, how that car are so much faster is because of that the body of the weight is so lighter, and the power, the engine is kind of like so much kind of like powerful. That's why those car kind of like run that faster and things like that. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing, if we wanted to fly, we need a wings, and we need a very lighter body. Lighter body means we shouldn't supposed to be accumulate the muscles. Like basically we have muscles, and why do we have muscles? Because of that we kind of like eat and things like that. But birds doesn't really have muscles. Why? Because if they have muscles, then probably they would kind of like somebody utilizing extra weight and things like that. and they are not meant to be kind of like a fly when they have muscles. So possibly if you wanted to fly, then we don't really require a muscle. Like basically we shouldn't supposed to be kind of like assembly build the muscle. Okay, so but muscles are really essential. It kind of like gives you strength and things like that, because when you are flying you really require muscles. Okay, right? Yeah, but you cannot accumulate the muscles inside your body. So what should be supposed to be happen? Then you have to eat every single time, like every fucking time, like every single minute, like a bird does. Like a bird are kind of like eating all the time, and this is what we should supposed to do. We have to be eat every single minute. Yeah, every single minute we just need to kind of like energy and things like that, because we cannot store our energy into the muscle format. So that's why we just need to eat every single time, and we just have to poop every single time, like a bird does. And which is also kind of like a something that not possible, right? Okay, yeah, like imagine you are kind of like a munching every single time, like eat. It just, I don't know. Okay, so if I'm thinking about the physical point of perspective, if I'm thinking about the biological point of perspective, if I'm thinking about the every possible perspective, it's not meant to be fly. Okay, yeah, I'm kind of like thinking about all the imagination that kind of like a feel that yeah, let's fly. Like basically I love flying too. It's not really that I don't really love fly. Like basically I love flying. Like basically when I watched the Man of Steel and that scene when the first time Superman could fly, that scene was like, oh my god, it's just like goosebump, dude. The way that he fly, the way that he kind of like do the sonic bump, like boom, and just like boom. Just feel like that. Oh my god, why not I can fly like that? But you cannot. Yeah, it's just, yeah, like I am really kind of like a somebody mesmerized and kind of like a feel that yeah, if I could fly, like dude, yeah, I could fly. But yeah, we can't. But still, okay, yeah, is this thing that key we shouldn't supposed to be kind of like a stop our ambitions and goals because of that key we are not meant to be. Okay, yeah, humans are always push themselves to kind of like a little bit further that what they could supposed to be do. That's why we build the wingsuit, that's why we build the kind of like a jetpacks, well, that's why we build the kind of like aeroplanes and kind of like a parachutes and kind of like assembly that we could fly. Like basically definition of the hundreds year ago that we cannot able to be fly, we kind of like make that false, and we are kind of like flying like that. And in the future we will kind of like fly even more further. Okay, yeah, obviously our body is not meant to be fly, but we will kind of like design such a kind of like some equipments or things that we could able to be fly, and which is kind of like somewhat something really good. Okay, yeah, because our human thought process or human capability is not meant to be fly, but our brains could able to be fly. Our thought process, our imagination, our the way that we think are let us fly, and that is I'm believing that, and that is that we could supposed to be do this thing. So yes, our body biology is not meant to be fly, but our minds are not let us. Our mind are kind of like a let us to fly, and this is what we need. Alright, this is by the way the question is actually about that key, can we kind of like a woke up and fly like we should supposed to be kind of imagine that particular stuff that we could able to fly. But still I kind of like simply give the experiment that why we cannot able to be fly. Okay, yeah, this is it and thank you.